We're very excited to have on this edition of the Raz Report, Jeremy Allaire, founder and CEO of Circle. And he hasn't just founded and started Circle, many companies prior, which we will get into. This should be an awesome conversation where you're going to hear about building companies, building enterprises, and Circle, USDC, which is taking the world by storm in a good way. So I just want to get right started with Jeremy here. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Psyched to be here.
Yeah, no, thanks for coming on. Circle is your latest company. I think you've raised over $700 million for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Founded the company 9 years ago and have grown it since then quite a bit.
Has it taken a lot of different gyrations, or from when your original 2013 founding this company, is it kind of where you thought it would be? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. So, when we founded the company back in 2013, there were a whole set of ideas that we had about digital currency. And we were very excited about this idea that you could build what we like to think of back then as an HTTP of money, meaning like a protocol for money on the internet. And by money, we meant sort of traditional money, meaning like the liabilities of a central bank, what we think of as everyday money, but kind of convey onto that money the power of cryptocurrency. So Bitcoin, obviously, itself kind of brought into the world this idea of a protocol that could work on a decentralized infrastructure to enable people to directly exchange value in a digital cash-like way. We wanted to build on that same fundamental technology foundation, but enable people to exchange, stable value assets like dollars or euros. And we believe that a kind of protocol layer for money would eventually become possible on top of these blockchain infrastructures. And that was sort of a core mission and goal from the outset. We experimented with realizing that idea through building out a lot of kind of digital currency banking infrastructure. We built a consumer-facing application that kind of brought that to life. We actually built it on top of Bitcoin, which was sort of the first generation blockchain that was available back in 2013 and 2014 and 2015 and during that time period. And then eventually in 2016, when Ethereum, which is sort of the second generation blockchain technology, really emerged, it kind of introduced more of the building blocks that we had been looking for back in 2013 when we founded the company. And then that allowed us in 2017 to begin work on and then ultimately release what's now known as USDC, which is in fact a protocol for dollars on the internet and eventually other fiat currencies too. But founding vision was sort of there. The path to it, obviously, it takes many sort of shifts and stuff. The metaphor I like to use is you can see the mountaintop. You can literally, standing far back, you can see that mountaintop and how beautiful that looks. But you actually don't know how you're going to get to the top of the mountain. And you may actually go up one path and realize, oh, I'm staring over a cliff. I need to go back down and go up another path and find my way there. But you can always kind of see that top. So we're just working towards that. A lot of other ideas in the founding vision of the company that we're still early on in terms of pursuing.
Very interesting. I mean, so that's going to bring us back to some of your other companies, but so Ethereum is what allowed you to go create USDC versus, like, at first I know you said you were doing some stuff with Bitcoin, but Ethereum is what allowed you to start looking at how to create this USDC.
Yeah. So back in 2012 and 2013, there were a lot of technologists, well, not a lot actually back then. There's a lot now, but there were technologists getting involved in this space, and a lot of us got really excited about ideas like issuing other assets on top of the blockchain, or smart contracts and programmable money, and what it would mean if you could have, if you could say issue a dollar token and have a smart contract that could enable the programmability of that. That was like a mind-blowing concept. And as you know, early in my career, I worked on programming languages, app development infrastructure, developer platforms, content infrastructure, lots of things like that. And so I had a background in thinking about, developer platforms, and the idea of an open infrastructure that was like a developer platform for money on the internet was super exciting. And so there were a lot of ideas on how to do it in 2013. It just technically wasn't possible. And actually, the history of Ethereum is really relevant here, because Vitalik, who also was really excited about a lot of these ideas of how you could extend this kind of blockchain infrastructure to do other things, a lot of people thought that might happen, that Bitcoin itself as an open source project would evolve to do those things. But there was kind of an ideological battle between those in the core development community who really wanted to kind of keep Bitcoin simple and focused on being a kind of digital gold store of value. And then there's a whole other group of technologists that wanted to advance this into being something that's more like an operating system that you could build a lot of things on top of, including things like protocols for stablecoins, DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, all these things that have emerged, right? So it was really that kind of forking off and development of a new infrastructure layer that then made it possible to pursue and execute something like USDC.
Okay. And I want to nerd out on more USDC and the history. This is awesome. Like how there was two different schools of thought, and we're going to get back to it, but we're going to take it back to the early days. Jeremy, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a small town in Minnesota,
Like by St. Paul, or like where?
No, southeastern Minnesota.
Okay.
A town called Winona, Minnesota.
Okay.
And then went to college in the St. Paul at Macalester College, and studied political science, philosophy, and a concentration in economics. And got introduced to the internet in my dorm room, literally in 1990. Had a high-speed internet connection, which in 1990 there was not a lot you could do on the internet, but I was down the rabbit hole, became completely obsessed, made all of my educational work about it, and started using it in my studies around kind of what was happening in the former Soviet Union and what was happening in the sort of changing revolutions around the world, and got me excited about the idea of an open network, open permissionless networks, decentralization, disintermediation, a lot of these themes that still show up today in the internet space. Got me into it, and then graduated college there and started working on my first company.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. So you're in Minnesota, I'm from Michigan, so another Midwestern guy. And now Midwestern people tend to be very nice. So that's awesome. Totally. Exactly. Now, this is a silly question. Did you ever growing up in Minnesota, was Mall of America a thing when you were growing up?
So the Mall of America emerged when I was a little bit older. I think when I was in college, maybe it emerged. And then, certainly experienced it. Yeah.
I had a girlfriend who went to Michigan that lived in Minnesota, and I still remember like flying out there and spending a date at the Mall of America. It was a movie theater and these roller coasters. That's what I remember, and I couldn't believe how big it was.
That was before before Dubai started doing things like that.
Right. This was like 1998 is when I came to Minnesota for that. Okay. Yeah. So as a kid, did you have were you doing 1990? That's pretty sweet with the modems. That's very early. But as a kid, did you have side hustles? Were you selling the newspaper like Mark Cuban was doing the garbage bags? Were you doing anything like that?
Yeah. So I did. So look, I had I was a paper boy. That was my first job, if you want to call it. But I got really lucky in a sense. When I was a teenager, I convinced my parents to take kind of a small amount of money that had been passed down to me from my grandparents, and was in mutual funds, which was a big deal in the 80s. You had mutual funds. I convinced them to let me invest it into baseball cards. And so in the kind of mid to late 80s, I ran something called Allaire Sports Cards. So I kind of ran a trading operation, and I would deal, and I would go and basically do baseball cards. So that was my side hustle, helped me pay for my spending money in college. and things like that.
So did you have tables at like card
Yeah,
shows?
totally.
So you'd buy cards, flip them, and did you make some decent money doing it?
Absolutely, yeah. So I took long positions on certain players. Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco, those were some of the big ones in the late.
What was like one of your best trades?
It was what was his name? Brett Saberhagen.
Okay.
Brett Saberhagen was 19. He was like 19-1 or whatever. He had just an incredible record, and I like accumulated a huge bunch of those. And then that was a short-term trade, right? I accumulated a bunch and then flipped them at a huge increase in value as everyone kind of wanted the Brett Saberhagen rookies. I think that was one of the best trades I did. But I would do arbitrage as well. I'd go to these shows and find someone who really wanted X, and I would just run around and find it, and buy it for Y, and then turn it around. So there's that, and then I had I still have a fairly sizable collection, but that was my first side hustle. Yeah.
So and now cards are back in fashion. I have a good friend, Josh Luber, the founder of StockX, who joined Gary Vee and the guy Ruben on their new card venture at Fanatics. Yeah, and so totally. It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. I still have those boxes from every year, like from 1980, totally. And I haven't opened them, but hopefully they're worth something. But so now I'm moving up to your 1990. You're in college. You're loving the internet. There's no really internet, but you had a modem.
Yeah. I didn't even have a modem. I had a T1, which was basically like a hardwire. It was effectively Ethernet, right? But hardwired into a campus network. And campuses were some of the only places that had access to the internet for research purposes. And a T1 was, even now, whatever, that was back then 1.5 megabits per second, which was really, really good. Yeah. So
I'm like shocked, by the way, that you had 1.5 mega. I mean, I remember having 56K at my parents' house, and that was unbelievable.
Right.
Because it started at 12K.
Yes. Right. 14.4 modems. Yeah.
Yeah. 14.4, and then make the noise, and I would be in those message boards or those forums. I remember it like yesterday. Okay. Because my parents had more than one phone line. You had to do one line. Okay. But I want to move to this. So then you were doing, you had your success with the card days. And then you're in college and you have this, you're exploring this whole open network of sorts. Were your parents supportive of that?
No, not at all. They were like, I don't know what this is. I don't understand this. I graduated college in 1993, and my degrees, there was, the tail end of the first Gulf War recession. And my college degrees were not themselves that useful, which is fine. I studied, what I thought would be interesting to help understand the world and whatnot. And so I was like temping, but on the side, I was just going deeper and deeper and deeper into the internet space. And I remember, kind of coming home, I quit my temp job and said, fuck this. I'm going to be an internet consultant, what I called myself, which was basically like, helping educate people about businesses how to use the internet, and actually working on the very, very first websites. Right, this was before even like Mosaic was sort of hacking around, basically helping organizations figure out how to build stuff on the web. And I went home, and my father was just so distraught and just so afraid, like that he didn't understand any of it. And he was like, this isn't a job, so concerned. But I was following my bliss, and it was good timing in 1993 to be kind of really going down that rabbit hole and learning all the technology and figuring out what it was to build stuff back then. And that led to the genesis of some of the first products that I helped build and create.
Yeah. So I love it. So you were like, you termed yourself as an internet consultant. You didn't have a role yet. You didn't know what you were doing, but you just said you were following your bliss. And something that, you know, you're a little bit referring to is ignorance is bliss. Sometimes you don't know, right? I mean, and then what happens is you created, I think, Cold Fusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
CF, I remember that was the extension of websites because
Yes.
1998, 2000, Jeff Lawson, who's a friend, I went to high school, middle school with him. He created Twilio, TWI. Yeah, do you know him?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I was in college with him. I had a textbook site called College Book Zone, but he started Versity, VERSITY, Versity Notes. And what did he use for it? Cold Fusion.
Yeah.
It was Versity because, you know, the extension, right?
Right, totally. Yeah, I mean, so the basics there were in 1994, building an interactive application that you could use through a web browser was virtually impossible. But learning HTML was actually pretty straightforward. So there were all these people learning HTML, and then in 1995, more people. And I really wanted to be able to do interactive apps where you could connect a database, you could have interactivity, and my idea was that anyone should be able to kind of build a global online service. Because back then, like, the idea of an online service was you had to have AOL or you had to have, you know, CompuServe or whatnot. But I was convinced that an open network that anyone could publish to or any device could connect to it would be a lot better. And so working with my brother, who's a much more of a computer scientist than I am, kind of became the product manager designer for Cold Fusion, and him the kind of chief architect. And we ended up kind of working through a lot of ideas and building essentially the first easy to use web programming language, and what is now known as an app server, an application server, one of the very first commercial app server, which basically was a piece of software you could put on a machine, connect a database, do transactions, dynamically generate web pages. And, you know, that paradigm now, you know, is everything from SaaS and content management and everything else on the internet. So built that and, you know, got super passionate about enabling developers to kind of dream what they wanted to build on the internet, everything from content to community to e-commerce to all kinds of things, and build, you know, a developer platform business.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember the extension CFM, I think it was.
Yes.
And
it's like, you can find it out there. There's still millions of sites with that are still run by that. It's now owned by Adobe. That product line is owned by Adobe, which bought Macromedia, which is I merged my first company, or we merged Allaire into Macromedia as a public company.
Yes, and when you started Cold Fusion, you and your brother, what'd you call the company, like the Allaire Corporation?
Allaire Corporation, yeah. And then we had a whole family of products. We had the most popular HTML web development tool in the world, HomeSite. And,
oh, really?
And HomeSite had literally millions of developers use HomeSite. So most websites in the 1990s were built using that. And it was one of the reasons why Macromedia wanted to acquire us, because they had Dreamweaver. And Dreamweaver was really popular with professional designers. But like the average Joe or Jane would get HomeSite. It was free, and it was like super powerful HTML editor. And so we had millions of people using that.
So was that like HomeSite and Front Page back in the day?
So no one used Front Page because it was so awful, because it forced you into like these templates. You couldn't get control. So HomeSite was like, gave you access to the HTML and made it really easy to edit the HTML. And we gave it away for free. It was like it was a freemium product. We wanted to get it out there. And then we got other people into our more advanced products.
So you were doing freemium before that was even a word.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you raise money for Cold Fusion when you were building this thing? Yeah.
So Allaire Corporation raised, I think it was 3 rounds of venture capital.
Wow.
And then like a mezzanine financing. And then we IPO'd in January of 1999, and we were a public company on NASDAQ for 2 years. And in January of 2001, we merged with Macromedia, which was about 3 times larger than us, and merged the 2 public companies. and I became the chief technology officer of Macromedia.
What was like versus the IPO process versus the M&A process? What'd you like better?
Well, I like building and operating. I like that a lot. It's interesting, there are times and places where M&A makes sense, both as a buyer and as a seller. Obviously, the vast majority of outcomes in business are some form of merger transaction, typically, or bankruptcy. So the number of companies that remain independent is smaller. But I think but both had a lot of advantages back at that period of time. Merging at the time was a really good thing for our company, and actually gave us a much stronger platform. That was, as you recall, when 9/11 happened, and the kind of entirety of the certainty of the market and really the demand for internet software and stuff kind of collapsed alongside the collapse of the .com bubble.
Okay. And by the way, you didn't stop there. You didn't take this deal and you stopped creating. But one of the questions that someone wrote into me during your time building Cold Fusion and the whole, Macromedia or Adobe days, were there times where you were nervous about failing, or there was tough times during that, or was it more straight up?
Oh, no. I mean, every single thing I've ever worked on, there's been tons of ups and downs. And there's sort of like a mythology when you see businesses or companies that have succeeded. I mean, Circle itself has had so many different iterations and projects, and we've had different product lines we've built, we've acquired, we've sold, lots of things. And the same thing, with Allaire, we had huge early success, and then it was more competitive. We had new businesses that we had built and launched that had a lot of demand around them, but then struggled to scale. So many things. And then at Macromedia, we had 24 different product lines, but some weren't growing, and you had to kind of kill the product line or put it in maintenance mode, offshore the development. I mean, challenging stuff. The .com bust led to effectively 50 to 70% reduction in force in terms of employees. That's really hard. 2008 crisis, when building Bright Cove, we had to restructure the company to be cash flow positive because it was looked like the world might end. We also, as a startup, tried 3-4 different go-to-market ideas, product ideas, and that are all thematically going in one direction. But some of them stick, some of them don't, and so you jettison the ones that don't, and you double down on the ones that really are. And I think that's just the agility that you need in building anything, any kind of institution, not just a tech company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Bright Cove, did you just see hey, there needs to be a better video platform out there? How did you get to starting that? I know you had initial IPO in 2012, and then you left in a little bit later. But how did you get to that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, so in 2002, when I was chief technology officer of Macromedia, we put the ability to render video and have video as a programmable object in something called Flash Player. And Flash Player at the time was the most ubiquitous piece of software in the history of the internet. 98% of computers in the world had it. We could actually upgrade the internet to a completely new virtual machine, essentially a new client, in less than 12 months. So we put video in, and it was right before broadband came out for consumers. And it was really clear to me, looking at broadband, Wi-Fi, devices that could be connected to those, and then having a ubiquitous playback mechanism for video, I got really excited, started incubating ideas inside of Macromedia for basically self-publishing, self-video publishing type of applications. Actually built something internally that the company did not want to bring to market. I was really frustrated. My vision was video is going to become as ubiquitous as text on the web. Everyone's going to become a video publisher. Every business is going to be able to distribute television quality video to devices everywhere. And so this was in 2002, 2003. And so I got frustrated and left, went to a VC as a technologist in resident, General Catalyst, and incubated Bright Cove. and then founded it in 2004, really with this idea that, again, video was going to become as ubiquitous as text on the web, and that you needed a new generation of publishing platforms for it that could integrate everything that was needed for either a brand, like a corporation or an organization, or a media company itself, to basically do direct distribution of television instead of relying on cable and satellite and all the old ways, and transform other media companies who weren't in television and video into being into television and video. So it was a video platform company, a SaaS company, as we now call these, and founded in 2004. And it had a really nice growth run. I took it public in early 2012, and then kind of stepped into a chairman role after about a year, because I had gone down the crypto rabbit hole. And then in 2013, just became obsessed with what was going on in crypto, and made a decision to basically, start Circle.
Yeah, and we're gonna get through one more question on that. Do you are you like mad or no, like Cold Fusion? You were early on this stuff with Cold Fusion. Like, do you wish that was a de facto standard for web applications speaking to databases? I just remember Cold Fusion was my first website.
Yeah.
And then ASP became around, .NET came, and then there was other ones.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about that?
I mean, first of all, I'm so happy because I got to build something that millions of people got to benefit from, and tens of thousands of companies, and enabled. I have so many people who come to me and I randomly meet who say, like, you changed my life, you changed my career, you made it possible for me to accomplish things I never thought I could do. And that's really powerful, empowering people. The logo for Cold Fusion was a fist and a lightning bolt, and it was sort of like empowerment. Cold Fusion, the idea of Cold Fusion itself was like this free source of energy. So it was really about empowering developers, enabling people to express their ideas. And I did that, and we did that, and it was awesome. And so I feel great about that. But technologies get obsoleted so fast all the time. I mean, no one uses ASP, no one uses any of this stuff now, right? People are using, Node.js, and
Right.
they're using, they're using, whatever, Python. They're using Ruby on Rails, whatever they're using. Development languages, frameworks, tools, etc., are constantly in a state of change. And then, new paradigms emerge: mobile apps, iOS, Objective-C, C#, all this stuff. It's just constantly evolving. So I don't feel bad about that at all. I think it was a contribution to the development of an industry. And the same thing's going on with blockchains right now. And I know we'll come back to that, but it's like, basically all these blockchains are just competing for developer mindshare, their operating system like platforms. And, what we're using today is very likely not what we're going to be using in 5 years. Like, no one kept building on DOS. Eventually there was, Windows 32, and then people abandoned that and built on other things. So I think there's always this evolution, this technological obsolescence.
It sounds like a natural progression, but you definitely can wear the flag that most sweet websites back in the day were Cold Fusion. I remember when Jeff Lawson switched Versity to Cold Fusion, and I'm like, oh wait, do I need to do that with my website too now? I remember it. That's why I know the .cfm days. I would look to see the extensions. It's just so funny to me. And I was in college, and so it was okay. So now we're the last 20-25 minutes of this interview. It's all Circle. It's all crypto. But to get to Circle, Mark Cuban emailed me a question.
Okay.
Mark Cuban's known you from his tech days.
Yep.
His question is, what did you learn from your Allaire or your database days that you are applying today?
Oh, I mean, it's actually really relevant. I mean, as I talk about the inspiration for Circle and kind of what, I've sort of been inspired by in this space. I mean, in many ways, right, what got me super excited about the internet in the first place was this kind of obsession with the idea of the internet itself being an open network that was permissionless, that anyone could bring a computer to and connect, and that anyone who did that could take open protocols like the SMTP protocol or the HTTP protocol or the VoIP protocol, or these sort of protocols, which are really just public IP, intellectual property that's open source, it's in the public domain, people can write software to it, and that you could connect anyone anywhere through these protocols and do really amazing things in terms of information exchange, knowledge exchange, communications. So powerful. That's what drew me into the internet in the first place, and kind of an obsession with open networks, decentralized and distributed models, and what that could unleash, and really a belief that that architecture could maximize access, and could maximize the ability for people to reach the most people in the world, and entrepreneurship and ideas. So that was what informed the work around cold fusion back then. And so if I fast forward to crypto, that was fundamentally the insight for me in 2012 and early 2013 was, this is just like a replay. This is just another open protocol on the public permissionless internet that solved a set of problems that hadn't been solved before, which was a way to ensure that data could not be counterfeited, and that transactions could happen with certainty, in an irreversible way, without requiring centralization. And like, these are big ideas. And it was like a fundamental new infrastructure layer of the internet was being born. And so when I looked at it and said, okay, this is going to do for the exchange of value. And I don't just mean moving value from point A to point B. I'm talking about the richness of what we do in exchanging value as people, as entities, as corporations. It's going to do for the exchange of value what the web and those earlier protocols did for information and communications. And to me, in 2013, like, that was so profound, because I actually believe the web of value exchange, if you want to, whatever you want to call it, the internet of value, is going to be extraordinarily more valuable and extraordinarily more impactful than the web of information. And so it very much informed how I think about this and the work that we're doing here.
Wow. Well, that was a great answer and makes a lot of sense how you're here today. When you started Circle, did you start with anyone else, or was it just by?
I co-founded the company with Sean Neville. Sean is absolutely brilliant. He co-led the company with me, almost like co-CEOs for a long time, and then several years ago, he just stepped into a director role. He's on the board of directors, and he runs a crypto incubator, crypto kind of studio incubator. Brilliant. But he and I had worked together back in Allaire, my first company. We worked together a bunch at Macromedia. We worked together at Brightcove. He's just one of the most brilliant minds, technological minds, strategic minds, creative minds. So yeah, so he co-founded it with me. Was
Circle easier to raise money for than your previous ventures, since your huge track record of success?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we started the company, I kind of went to people who'd invested with me and who'd made money with me in the past and said, this is what I'm working on. And they're like, Bitcoin, like, I don't get this. You're crazy. This seems crazy, but we believe in you. So go for it. I mean, that kind of thing. So it definitely helped. And then even, 2013 and then 2014, 2015, during that time, there were not a lot of quote unquote adults in the room in the space. If people think it's a Wild West now, it was an extraordinary Wild West back then. And we kind of had, seasoned entrepreneurs, technologists. We had a really strong proactive approach with regulators, with kind of major fiduciaries, and really worked really hard to try and build something that was compliant. And that, differentiated us as well and allowed us to raise, quite a bit of capital, I think, a couple $100 million within our first few years of getting started.
And were you personally buying Bitcoin back in those early days, 2013, when Bitcoin was probably nothing?
Yeah, absolutely. And buying Ethereum when it was, less than $1, and buying Solana when it was less than $1.
And you still own some of that?
I am a owner of crypto assets. I don't talk about my particular trading and liquidity strategies, but I'm long. I'm quite structurally long on crypto.
Okay.
Crypto assets, yeah.
All right. And the question I was going to say, so what was the idea behind USDC? And then also, what would you define as a stable coin to a fifth grader asking you the question?
Yeah. So, on the internet today, I can download a piece of software like WhatsApp or log into a service like Gmail, or open up Google Chrome, and I can connect to anyone else directly. I can have a direct communication with them. It doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't matter where they are in the world. As long as they have a smartphone, they can get that piece of software. We can do that. Or if there's someone who has an idea and wants to connect their computer to the internet and put some content on it, as long as I have a web browser, I can connect to that. And that's generally the case, other than some authoritarian regimes that have great firewalls. But even there, like, it's generally the case. You can connect to anyone. I can freely communicate with anyone in China right now. And that model is so straightforward. It's the air we breathe, right? It's the air we breathe. We don't even think about it. The fact that this kind of open, open, permissionless, global, decentralized network of communications and information exists. So why can't we do that with money? Why can't we have a way where someone can just download a piece of software from an app store, and then someone else could download a different piece of software made by a different creator or a different piece of hardware, or log into a service and exchange value with each other instantly, globally, frictionlessly, at no cost? It's really that simple. Is how do we make it possible for storing, moving dollars or digital dollars to work in exactly the same way we have with information and data? And that's what we set out to solve, is that problem, and doing it on the DNA of the internet, doing it around this idea of an open protocol that anyone could connect to. So that's really the fundamentals of what USDC allows for. But I think the idea goes far broader, because you now have essentially an open API for dollars on the internet, and it's programmable dollars on the internet, and so you can do a lot with that. And so the use cases are really, really exploding.
How big is USDC these days?
So USDC has grown really fast. At the start of the pandemic, there were about 400 million USDC in circulation. That was just like, let's call it 6 months, no, it was like a year after or so after we had launched. And then it grew to 4 billion in circulation by the start of 2021. And it grew from 4 billion to 42 billion in circulation at the end of last year. And it's already grown to over 52 billion in circulation just in the past couple months here. And so USDC is about that big, and has supported trillions of dollars of transactions just on the public internet using blockchains. And it's still early days. It's super, super early days. Our view is that eventually there could be more than 1 trillion USDC in circulation, and could be used for every imaginable use case for money, and use cases that we haven't even thought of, because programmable money's not existed until now.
I mean, this was one of my most exciting interviews I've had, because I've been dying to ask more questions about this USDC. As you know, I'm an investor in USDC, but I also know many companies, hedge funds, that use USDC to exchange and quickly send over the blockchain, and love it, swear by it.
Yeah.
And it's like the greatest thing ever since sliced bread. And this guy that I talked to last week about when I was telling you this interview, he just couldn't go. He was just going, it's changed our life as a business. We're able to, quickly send money, receive money, convert it to USDC, then put it into USD. I mean, it was like a total nerd out, and that. So the questions that and I've watched a lot of interviews, the question my brother has. So I've, it's like, we're doing these characters. I got the brother, conservative guy, attorney, he's very smart. The first question he asked me is, well, how can USDC or these different exchanges offer such nice interest rates when banks are giving 0.0, or now they're giving 0.5. But how can they offer, interest rates from 4% to 12% or 10%?
Yeah.
That's the first question that you have to answer for my brother.
Yeah. So
I know that's not you. I know that there's different. I know there's circle yield. So if you're an institutional client or thing, you can go to circle yield, which, as you said in several interviews, it's over collateralized and you should be protected. But we'll get to that one. I just wanted to know, like, some of these places are 10%, 9%, Voyager, BlockFi, Nexo, Genesis, etc.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look. So if you think about it, you have a kind of base layer, which is the sort of digital cash equivalent of USDC. And that is this, always redeemable for $1. And it's a regulated, digital cash instrument that exists. And it's very easy to exchange, right? With point to point, as your friends or others that you've talked to, really, really straightforward to send it, receive it, and use it. And it's become very, very popular as a digital currency to use in trading, investing, international payments, other things. And so as its utility has grown, and as more and more people and firms want to use it as a form of working capital, as a new kind of electronic stored value working capital mechanism, there's higher and higher demand for people who want to borrow it. And so one of the really powerful things about blockchains is not only do they allow these fast transactions to happen, but you can actually build, essentially, borrowing and lending models on top of it. And so there's grown over the past, in particular, the past several years, last 2 to 3 years, large, both centralized, what are often called CeFi lending markets, and what are called DeFi lending markets, where the market of borrowers and lenders is convened by a piece of software on the internet. So you're not dealing with a company, you're just dealing with a protocol. But nonetheless, you have essentially interest rate markets of borrowers and lenders. And the demand to borrow USDC is high. And the interest rate that borrowers are willing to pay is high. And that is the source of those yields. Basically, you have borrowers, and to put it fairly simply, the other side of that borrowing, and I'll use circle yield as an example because it's the one I understand probably the most. You lend us USDC, and we lend it wholesale to institutional borrowers. So these are, in fact, hedge funds, family offices, systemic trading firms, electronic markets firms, or other major firms in the ecosystem that want to operate using USDC. And these are firms that are borrowing at a high interest rate, but who are generating returns north of that. So, an 8% interest rate, to borrow at an 8% interest rate or borrow at a 10% interest rate, that's not unheard of in a lot of things. Our credit cards are 20% interest rates or 17% interest rates. Venture debt, which is what startups borrow, typically have interest rates of 10, 12, 13, 14% on them. Interest rates in securities lending markets, which is the interest rates that say an institutional fund would pay to borrow against their stock, can be fairly high. Now, corporate debt that's underwritten, where a corporation's borrowing against their balance sheet and their P&L, that's underwritten by an investment bank and has a coupon and a rating and so on, that tends to be a lower interest rate kind of debt product, right? But generally, when you look at interest rates that people borrow at, they vary from low single digits to high double digits or higher. And so what you have in USDC is you have a borrowing and lending markets that exist at the retail and institutional level, and those are floating right now. So on DeFi right now, you can borrow USDC, I think for like 3%. So the interest rate markets adapt to kind of market conditions and demand.
Yep, and you could you could borrow, but then you can earn interest at a longer term. You can lock in 6 months, 12 months. Right.
That's right. That's right.
How can they lock that in if they don't know if the borrower is the borrower borrowing short term, or are they borrowing a long term when you lock in for 6 to 12 months on Circle Yield I'm referring to?
Yeah. So with Circle Yield, if you want to effectively lend for 6 months and get a fixed rate and a fixed return over that time, that's exactly right. That capital is then being utilized downstream by borrowers for longer periods of time. So they have effectively, oftentimes they'll have like the equivalent of like an open credit facility that they're utilizing in their own business, and that credit facility has a term on it and a time frame on it and the like. Got it.
Okay, so now I personally use Voyager, a little bit of BlockFi, and doing, I guess, some stuff at Genesis and Circle Yield. I'm getting an account open.
Yeah.
So no, I'm working with your customer service there, as so we're getting there.
Okay.
And why am I using the different places? Part of it is diversification, but I guess my question is, it's the commonality is USDC, which to me reminds me of the Cold Fusion days. Like, you're the creator of this protocol that everyone uses now. There's a natural progression, as you said, different BlockFi technologies, and hopefully USDC, which I can't see it not growing. But you're not able to look at the collateral that, let's say, BlockFi has or Nexo or something has. So what's like do you have to review what their collateral is? I know you get audited, or USDC gets audited monthly to make sure people can pay it back. But a question I get all the time is like, how secure is my money in USDC at one of those other exchanges?
Well, the thing to remember is USDC itself is regulated, examined. USDC itself is a full reserve dollar digital currency. Now, if you're lending your USDC to someone else, you're determining what is the credit risk that I'm taking with who I'm lending to. It has nothing to do with USDC. It has to do with what are they doing with it.
Right.
So there are some major differences, right? Are you a secured creditor or are you an unsecured creditor? Is this unsecured credit that's then being used to do highly speculative trading, or is this secured credit with known institutional counterparties, right? So you're dealing with a huge variance. It's I like to use the example of a bank, right? If you walk into a branch of Chase and you say, "Here's $10,000," you're quote unquote depositing. You're not depositing $10,000. You're lending Chase $10,000, and you have a balance that says $10,000. But actually, what you have is you have a claim against their loan book. They're taking that $10,000 and they're lending it out 8 times over. And you're basically saying, hey, I think that they're going to be good for that. That the small business loans, the credit card loans, the home mortgages, the corporate debt, all the stuff that they're doing to take my money and lend it out on a fractional reserve basis 8 times. But fundamentally, you've got an IOU. And now, you might look at a dollar that you've quote unquote deposited at Chase really, really different than, say, let's say you went to a bank in Zimbabwe and they said you can deposit your dollars with us, and you'd say, well, I don't know, like I don't know, what are you gonna do with my dollars? And so it all comes down to what in fact are you seeing on the other side of that? So we've tried to design something with Circle Yield, which is very institutionally friendly. It's regulated, it's supervised, it's over collateralized, and it only faces the best quality institutional wholesale borrowers on the other side. And so we've just tried to build something with, I think, the kinds of features that make it attractive. It doesn't produce the highest yields. It doesn't produce the same yields you might see through some of these retail platforms, but there's a reason for that.
Okay. I know we have time for like 2 or 3 questions,
Yeah.
and I want to get to CND, but because we have a lot of investors. But before I do that, so what you're saying is like you know, each place is different, but I guess like, so if your grandma or whatever wanted to put in some money in USDC, obviously there's Circle Yield, there's other exchanges, but would you say diversify in terms of that? So if I had $100,000 and I wanted to put it in like I wanted just USDC, does it make sense to sometimes put some money in Voyager, some money in BlockFi? Like what I'm really asking is there a chance of default? Like I saw the Cred went bankrupt, but that was not because of USDC. That's the question I've been asked from like people in the base. Yeah,
it's a great question. And so the way I think about it is, you know, a lot of these products that are for individuals have kind of come out and provide some information, but I think there's limited information. And in fact, this has become a major issue from an investor protection, regime, right?
That's
so
the insurance,
you know, so very clearly, like I think the SEC's view is that these are lending products. They're not banks, and in fact, for the average person, they're basically making an investment, and a lot of these are offered they're unregistered, you know, investment contracts in a sense. And so BlockFi, you know, notoriously settled with the SEC that they, in fact, their earn product or whatever it's called was in fact, you know, not registered as a security and should be. And so they, you know, settled for $100 million fine and filed an S1. And so what is an S1? An S1 is a public disclosure document that a retail investor can read and understand. And you can decide, you can read through the S1 and say, like, what are the risks? What is this? Like, what am I actually getting into here? And so that's fair disclosure. So that's people and you know, the review of a major regulator, the SEC, right? And so that's one standard to look at. There are others that, you know, don't have any of that, and so you don't actually know what the underlying risk is, other than the reps that are made through marketing or maybe some high level stuff. And so I think you have to kind of look at this, you know, through that lens. Now, DeFi is a different story. If you you know, get USDC and you connect it to you know, Compound or Aave, or
what about Grow?
I don't know Grow very well.
Okay, I saw it. It's a new thing. I don't know it either. But
yeah. So you know, DeFi protocols have some advantages to them, but they also have a whole lot of risks to them as well. There have been DeFi protocols that are hacked. And this is like software, and all of a sudden the money is managed by software, and the software gets hacked, and you know, that's gone. But you have some, you know, DeFi protocols that are more pressure tested. There's probably going to be more and more disclosure audit type requirements on DeFi protocols over time, as well as the market participants want to have quote unquote better hygiene around them. So, you know, I think, you know, buyer beware on all this stuff.
Totally get that, and I think we'll have to have you come on again to talk more like CND for investors. I know you have a thing to run to, but when you say buyer beware, like I talked to the CEOs of Voyager who, you know, believe that well vetted borrowers and very trustworthy, et cetera, et cetera. My only, I guess, contention was if any of these places do have a problem, like USDC has a brand, and like it could potentially hurt USDC's brand. So like, do you talk to these exchanges to make sure that they're like doing trying to like making sure the borrowers are good, or is it the same thing as like you can't, a bank went like the treasury doesn't talk to the local bank saying, hey, be careful on what you send out?
Yeah, it is really different. So we're because USDC is kind of a free floating digital currency, you know, it can be utilized in so many different applications and so many different businesses and so on. And, you know, you've got, you know, electronic markets firms that might be doing a trade with someone with USDC for $300 million in one transaction. You've got other, you know, NFT markets that are, utilizing USDC for micropayments on pieces of digital content. And those are, kind of multiple layers removed. It is important, though, that what we need to always ensure is that people understand USDC as a dollar digital currency itself is safe, stable, transparent, well-regulated, compliant, all these things. But, just like you use your dollars with, an online, payment service, you can still be defrauded. It wasn't the dollars that defrauded you. It was the other side of it, right?
So it is, like you said, buyer beware, but, and diversify, what have you. And
Yeah.
I don't know if you have 120 seconds or a minute to talk CND.
Sure.
I know you guys increased the valuation. So I was invested in the SPAC, which changed valuations because you guys increased it. So someone wanted me to ask you about that. If you don't want to address it right now, we can do it in a later interview, because I know you have another application to get to.
I'm happy to. Yeah. I mean, so we initially negotiated a merger with Concord Acquisition Corp. And a business combination agreement in July of last year. And getting through the SEC qualifications taken a bit longer than we had expected. We had thought it would be, consistent with other SPACs, 4 or 5 months. It's just taken longer, and which is fine. And we're getting through it. We're making progress through every round of comments. But as we kind of walked into the new year, the business outlook has changed pretty significantly. The company, grew USDC really rapidly. We're in a rising interest rate environment. Our transaction and treasury services businesses are taking hold nicely. And so we looked at, the actual deal was set to expire in April. And so we renegotiated the deal. We extended the timeline so that it had enough time to get through the de-SPAC and the SEC process. We also eliminated the PIPE from the first deal so that the company had the option to raise capital privately before the de-SPAC. And obviously the headline valuation went up. But what I would note is, alongside the 8K, also available on our investor relations site as well, and with the 8K, we also issued revised financial outlook for 2022 and 2023, which are considerably stronger from both a top line and a bottom line perspective from where we were, 9 months earlier, or whatever that exact timeline is. And so the increase in the value of the company is really reflective of the tremendous position that we've put ourselves in with the business, and obviously the new outlook.
Yep. And there's warrants, CNDWS, which I think they're like about 125. I love Circle. And I think what you explained to the users and listeners, because it's USDC, you're not backing up these banks. You're the means of just like a US dollar. And it is like, I don't know, if you had, let's just say $100,000 and you can use Circle. Well, Circle, I think there's a certain minimum requirement, but there are banks, some are offering 12%, some are offering 4%, some are offering 8%. They're all different. And the way I look at it is diversify. I wish there was like a hedge fund or a fund that had like 10% here at Voyager, 10% here at this. So that way I could be even more diversified versus manually having to open up accounts. But
there are emerging like stablecoin yield funds and stuff like that. So I see all kinds of stuff happening.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's because I personally, I told you, I have a lot in USDC, and but it's also the firm you work with and reading up about them. And I think what you've enabled cryptocurrency to me. I know Bitcoin gets all the press, but to me, you've enabled cryptocurrency to go mainstream, to have your principal, not change all the time, and have some interest on your cash. With the examples you gave about credit cards, I mean, when I give $10,000 to Chase, I'm not just giving it; they're taking that $10,000 and they're leveraging that up 5 times.
That's
and
right.
So why not, why not get interest on that? And I know there's other investors like Mark Cuban in USDC, and I mean tons of investors, like you said, the market. And any last words to get to? And appreciate your time, Jeremy. I know you're a busy guy. building the future of the industry, and you've done it numerous times over. So we thank you for your time. But any last words you want to say about USDC, Circle, or anything like that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate the time very much. And, I guess my final comment is, while it has grown a lot, we really think we're in the early days of this. And we think that the kind of volume and usage of digital currencies like this is going to be so much bigger. And the thing I'm most excited about is, the use cases that have yet to be invented. And sort of coming back to my developer tools days, programmable dollars on the internet and on open blockchains is going to unleash creativity in not just financial products and services, but in just how the economy even works. And so we're excited to just see what happens.
Yeah, and here at Benzinga, we try to track it, but maybe there's a new product we got to create here with that as well. We have like 30 million readers that come to our site a month, and there's probably something there that we're not thinking about. But yeah, I mean, if you look about from Cold Fusion to what you do with Brightcove, and you have digital dollars on the internet, it is so extendable that what we're sitting here talking about today, I mean, is going to be 100x bigger. Well, anyways, we'll stay in touch with you because
awesome,
you're on the cutting edge. Thank you again for the time to come on the Raz Report. Really appreciate it, Jeremy.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you.